Welcome to another episode of TPM Ridge, the podcast where we bring in industry leaders in technical program management to share their insights, experiences, and the lessons they've learned on the front lines of the TPM movement. I'm your host, Doron Katz, and each week we dive in deep into the methodologies, mindsets, and tools that will empower you to drive excellence in technical program management. Whether you're new to TPM or looking to take your skills to the next level, this podcast is your go-to resource for transforming TPM principles into real-world success. Welcome. Today we have Josh and Zhanat, two co-founders of the parent umbrella org of the TPM Ridge podcast, TPM Events, as well as co-authors of two really interesting TPM books, the Technical Program Manager's Handbook and Evangelizing the TPM Craft. We will talk about these books in a short while, but first, welcome to you both.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. So let's start first with you, Zhanat. Tell us a little bit about yourself and, for the benefit of the audience.
Of course. I'm Zhanat. I've been a technical program manager for a little more than a decade now. Started with Amazon, AWS, Uber, and most recently Robinhood. I primarily focus on infrastructure and platforms, including data platforms, search platforms. And as you mentioned, my personal mission outside of the company is to evangelize the TPM craft. And really glad to be here with this podcast, Doron, that you kickstarted. So kudos and shout out to you as well.
Thanks. Absolutely. And Josh, tell us about yourself too.
Yeah, hi, I'm Josh Teter. I'm a principal TPM at Amazon. I've also been at TPM for 12, 13 years, something like that. Most of that time at Amazon. Author of the Technical Program Manager's Handbook. And as you said, co-founder of TPM Events and TPM Summit, TPM Trails organizations.
Yeah, and the meetups, helping us at the meetups here in Seattle.
Definitely, yeah.
Great. And with this great panel of minds, I thought we would play a little game of Jeopardy. I've always enjoyed playing or watching Jeopardy growing up. I love this show. And we could play what's called a TPM Jeopardy. No buzzers today, but I thought, feel free to shout out and we can talk about the answers and, with this great panel, provide some insight for our audiences. And we'll kind of break this down into a couple of rounds, first round, a second round, and a lightning round, but and a couple of topics for each round you can kind of pick. So, to start off, we'll go with you, Zhanat. We'll have a couple of topics that which one of those you want to pick. You can choose, and then I'll call out a question and we can talk about it. So let's see how we go.
Sounds like a plan. And as I mentioned right before we started the recording, I feel like I'm getting a certification exam in the technical program management. A little bit nervous here, yes.
Yeah.
But ready to go.
Well, for you guys out there, you can use this as a practice for interviews, I guess. So let's see how we go. Okay, round one. And the categories on the board are project prioritization, scope creep, technical debt, conflict resolution, and risk management.
Well, let's go with risk management to just final figure it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, risk management. This approach helps you identify and mitigate risk in a project. In Jeopardy style.
I must admit, I have not watched much of Jeopardy.
Just you're coming up with the question. So what is the question to the answer he just gave you?
Wait, I'm coming up with a question.
Yeah, the answer is in the form of a question. Jeopardy has it flipped.
Yeah.
He gives you the answer and you provide
Gosh.
the question.
Man, I was absolutely not prepared for this.
Maybe you should have done a Wheel.
It's like Douglas Adams. You get the answer 42, but you don't know what the question was.
Right.
Maybe we should have done this a Wheel of Fortune style, right? Or you can just fill out.
Would you like me to go first?
Okay, just something example so that I understand the format, and I apologize for that. I should have done my homework and the good TPM.
go and watch an episode of Jeopardy before. Yeah.
Right. I thought that's the one, like, you pick a category, there's some points, and then you ask the question, I answer it, and I get the points.
Yeah, but they provide the answer, and then you say what is.
Yeah.
Ah. Okay, let's do a warm up round.
Like what is risk analysis? Like if I remember the answer
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah. So the approach that helps you identify and mitigate risks in a project.
What
Risk
is
analysis.
risk analysis?
What is risk analysis? Yeah. So we can chat a little bit about that. So use some of your experiences at Amazon, your past, and approaches that have helped you identify and mitigate risks, I guess, with risk analysis. So any anecdotes? Any of you guys want to give the audience?
I can kick it off. I kind of kicked the topic. So risk analysis is obviously part of any program and project management. But the way I learned more about risk analysis is by partnering with enterprise risk management organization, because those folks, they do really have this framework, how they approach risk analysis, risk registers, coming up with risk controls and whatnot. Right? So this is like vast industry practices. Before working with them, what I would do is have my own little table of risks, saying, okay, this is the risk for a program or for a specific milestone, and this is my mitigation plan. What I will do about this risk. Now, when I work with enterprise risk management and security organizations, they go much deeper, right? So they go by a framework which is acronym is RCSA, risk control self-analysis, and RCSA. And the way they think about risk is they break down the whole workflow. They start with the business processes because it's an enterprise risk management, right? So say at Robinhood, it would be trading any type of stock or options or crypto. At Uber, it would be the process of rider holding a driver. So that's the business process. And then they would brainstorm what can go wrong with this process. And at the next level, they go into controls. How do we detect this risk? That would be a detection control. How will we mitigate this risk if that risk materializes? What's our plan? Or how do we even prevent this risk so that risk itself will not materialize at all? And then they go through all these assessments. How good are my controls and how much it will reduce the risk, likelihood, and risk impact. And then you are left with the residual risk after your controls will be applied. So that was the big learning for me, which kind of shifted all my perspective in terms of how I approach risk management in this case, and technical program management. Right. So my program and the milestones becomes my processes, and then for each milestone, what can go wrong? What controls do I have in place? Even for TPM Summit, right? If you think about TPM Summit, so in a working group between Josh, Josie, and myself, we do have a risk register. And in risk register, we go, what process we have? We are crowdsourcing speakers. Well, what can go wrong? We will not have enough speakers. How are we going to detect that we don't have enough speakers? And what we're going to do if that risk will materialize, and how that will impact the final experience of attendees. And so that was a big warning, and like a little anecdote where I picked up a lot on the risk management. Josh, how about yourself?
Yeah, so shameless plug. I'm actually revisiting that chapter literally right now, or right before this. I was working on the risk management chapter of my book. And what you said is on point. And just a few anecdotes I'd add. It's you call out risk mitigation, right? And I think in the tech industry that happens often where we focus in on the mitigation, because if you think about the different ways of planning risk, going through your risk analysis, it's the easiest because you're not trying to keep it from happening, and you're not just giving up. You're being reactive in that. If it goes wrong, here's what I can do to lessen the impact, instead of how do I keep this from happening in the first place? And so people just often think risk analysis is all about mitigation, but it shouldn't be, right? That should be one of several things, and it really should be. You should look at more than one strategy, depending on the risk. You may have certain ways that you can avoid it, depending on when you notice the trends of it happening. But then there may be a point where that's no longer possible, and so you have to switch into a mitigation. And there's also transference, which I don't think we get into tech honestly that often. Transference is where you hand the risk to someone else, and that's usually getting a vendor to do it. I think a big one you could think of is you're working on a new framework that your team has never worked on, new technology. That's a risk to you, right? Because your team doesn't know about it, so the estimations are going to be poor. In the middle of work, they're going to find new things to work on, so milestones get pushed. So you can transfer that risk by hiring a vendor who knows that framework. But usually when you do that, you introduce another risk, and that risk is you're now depending on another team. So that original risk is gone, but you've introduced a new one. So it's with that, the other thing I would add is it's a cyclical process. People think of waterfall, or they think of project management as the step-by-step process. And really, it's a bunch of cycles. They're just a bunch of cycles intertwined, and risk management or analysis is something you should be doing at every step of the way.
Right.
And anytime, even if a risk comes up, that can trigger another risk, or a risk goes away and another one rears its head in its place. So it's something you're constantly working on throughout the entire project.
Yeah. And I guess you also have tolerance. There's a tolerance level that would trigger a risk. And then also, as you mentioned, transferring to another vendor. I guess also the option would be that you accept
Accept
the outcome. Yeah.
And the acceptance is an interesting one. Because people think that you're looking at it from you're accepting that something went wrong and just saying, yeah, fine, just move the milestone. And granted, that does happen. How many times I go, look, I'm green because I shifted the date. But really, a lot of that is born from the idea of risk. We inherently think of that as a negative concept, but there's positive risk too. Again, in our tech world, we don't see that analogy too often, but when you're looking at cost analysis, a big one is a group discount. Like you're out procuring stuff for our project, and you hit some threshold, and they offer you a discount. That is, quote, a risk to your budget, but it's an opportunistic risk. And in that case, you want to accept that. If at all possible, you want to accept that. And some people refer that as an opportunity, but it's in that same framework.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that acceptance isn't an automatic failure, but it could be a good thing as well.
I can chime in and say that in my experience, acceptance also can be that it is not a priority right now.
Yeah.
And I used to work with a company that was running out of one region, provided by cloud provider. If in one region, it's a risk in itself, right? So one region can go down, and that happened lots of times. So that was called out as a risk. But for that particular year, for that particular company, that wasn't the highest priority. So leadership accepted the risk, say, yes, we know it's happening. Yes, we are, for the time being, okay with operating out of one region. And we'll get to it when the time will be right and circumstances will be right. But for now, we acknowledge and we accept, and we move on.
Yeah.
I feel like we could probably just keep going and going and going on this, 'cause there's so much risk comes up everywhere. But for the sake of fun for our audience, do we want to
Go on the board again. Let's
go
find
on the
another
board.
category. Okay. So what do we have left? Project prioritization, scope creep, technical debt, and conflict resolution.
I will take scope creep for 200.
Monopoly dollars.
Monopoly dollars. I mean,
Okay, scope creep. This strategy helps you handle unexpected changes in project requirements?
What is change control?
What is change control? This strategy helps you handle unexpected changes in project requirements. What is
Woo!
what is change control? There we go.
Okay.
You go first, Josh.
Yeah. Some people use it, some people don't. Well, no. Okay. A little bit of a soapbox here. The thing about these terms, right? We talk about change control or change management, depending on where you are, what's going on. Every company kind of has their own style, their own verbiage, how they approach things. It took me a number of years at Amazon to realize, those of you at Amazon leaders, feel free to close your ears. They do follow process. They do follow the PMP. They just choose to use different terms for it. You do change control. If someone comes to you and says, hey, I want this new feature, if you say yes, congratulations. You just initiated some form of change control. Whether you send them to a queue and go through some approval process or what have you, either way, you in the face of change, you acted upon it. So you are doing it. I think when we talk about change control, we think about it in more terms of a very specific fill out this form, go get approval from these 5 signers. And yeah, consultation companies that have contracts written on budgets for a project, yeah, they're going to do that. Tech companies, you're going to take it as it comes and you're going to weigh on it in that moment. Maybe you bring in some stakeholders and you discuss them, like, is this really the right thing to do right now? To that end, sprint cycles. One of the main reasons that mechanism is there and is so powerful is it is change management. Every 2 weeks or at the end of every sprint, you have a moment to sit and look at your backlog, reprioritize, and if a new feature came in and they said, hey, we need to switch some things around, you have that moment to reassess and move forward. So it's kind of built into the system. So yeah, it's out there. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Sprint is interesting before we get to using that. So you
Yeah.
mentioned waiting till the looking at the backlog, waiting until the end of the sprint. But during the sprint, as you kind of have the definition of done, the acceptance criteria, and all that stuff. I guess during the sprint, do you find engineers that that would seek clarification? Is this the exhaustive list of things that need to be done? Do things kind of creep into that feature and a feature level?
Right. Yeah, and I have seen that, and that comes down to how thorough were you during your sprint plan? I remember when we first started doing Agile 10 years ago, our sprint plan meetings were 4 hours long. And we did the planning poker, determine the estimate, would then break the story down as a group. And we found all sorts of stuff during that. And then going into the sprint, you didn't have as many questions. But if it becomes a little more just commonplace, like, oh, I just do a sprint plan, and you treat that as just, what is the next thing I'm going to work on? And allow that person to then go off and figure it out on their own, then yeah, there's a higher likelihood of them coming back. But you can mitigate some of that by making sure the story is broken down. One of my favorite things to do is separate design and implementation. Don't ever, even if it's a simple thing, don't couple them together and say, go deliver this thing. Deliver a design first. Because what's built in that is asking questions, understanding the right path forward, getting sign off from the team. Then you come back to your next sprint. You say, now I have this design. I understand now what to implement. Now let me go do it. And so yes, there's questions, but you designed for that to happen. And in that case, it's it's not unexpected. And
sort of like a spike, I guess, right? Kind of thinking, was kind of doing research. Yeah. Zhanat, what do you? What are your anecdotes?
I need to bring a perspective. I want to bring the perspective that technical program management is very diverse in the areas where it is applied. I think depending on the nature of the program, someone will apply more rigid process of change control. What comes to mind? So Josh, you and I were both more from the software side of the house. But if you think about hardware side of the house, right? So you have hardware and you have really like hardwired requirements and specs. Now, if you need to change it, it's really hard because you're downstream input to the vendors, to everybody who produces little components for your device. It will be really, really hard without a rigid change control
Your
process.
point of no return. Right?
Exactly.
No return is much sooner.
And then the other area that came to my mind is very strictly regulated industries. So think about finance, think about healthcare, think about where your requirements are shaped by external forces, by regulators. So if you're in healthcare, right, so you certainly have HIPAA compliance that you need to take care of. And if your proposed change comes in and it somehow puts the company at risk, well, that definitely needs to be debated. And the company need to see, okay, this particular change, coming back to risk discussion, right? What is the impact to the company? And someone needs to sign off on that change. In finance industry, specifically saying brokerages, there are designated principals inside the company who actually go and pass specific tests with regulators like FINRA or SEC, and they are obligated to review the most impactful changes going out to production. So there also change control becomes very, very critical and more rigid. Not only if it is less regulated, more software, more agile environment, then yes, the process may actually hinder the velocity, and then over-indexing on the process can backfire in that case.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say, I mean, I'll use a dirty word in Agile, but we're working on SAFe at the moment, using SAFe, and
Hey, it's a safe environment right here,
Yeah.
right?
Speaking of overprocessing, PI planning, that in itself is almost the equivalent of doing OP planning at Amazon every couple of weeks. So, yeah, it becomes quite an exhaustive over-indexing, overprocessing. So I'm not quite convinced of that. Hopefully my employers don't hear that, or they're not watching this podcast or listening to this podcast. But
You're like those stand-up comedians. I saw a stand-up comedian say, I asked my parents not to watch my shows, but they still hear in the audience.
Okay, great. Let's do one more question from the board, and then we'll take a short break. So on the board, what's left? We got project prioritization, technical debt, and conflict resolution. Does that any of these sound great?
I'll go back our usual style, big bottle conflict resolution. Let's talk about that.
All right, conflict resolution. This is how you resolve conflicts between team members with differing technical opinions.
What is trade-off analysis?
Trade-off analysis. Okay, tell us about that.
Did I get it right then?
I
Or
want
it's
to know
something
is he
else?
right? I'm saying,
Well,
I'm trying to remember what his P&P hat. I'm like, and I don't remember that.
you're gonna have to remind us, I guess. Our PMP certification's like kind of dusted, and it's a while ago, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
All right, what is trade-off analysis?
Well, that you mentioned the conflict specifically on the technical approach, right? So you do have, say, two stakeholders with two different opinions on how to approach one. And as TPMs, at least in my experience, and what I usually tell folks on my team or the coach is that I prefer to wear a mitigator hat rather than a negotiator hat, right? When you negotiate something, you take a stance, you have a position. When you mediate, sorry,
Mediate,
can we roll it
yeah.
in? Can I roll it back? I will.
Mediate.
Not mediator. Mediator. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. let it roll back. Okay.
Mitigate comes when you pick the wrong one and then you clean it up.
Exactly. So, so the trade-off analysis usually happens when you have two different stakeholders who have two different approaches to solve one problem. And the approach that worked in my experience and what I usually coach to the team I lead is that TPMs should wear a mediator hat rather than a negotiator hat. What it means. If you're negotiating, you take a position. And you have a strong opinion about one way to do things. But as TPMs, we focus on solving the problem. That every problem can have multiple ways to solve it, to address it. And as a mediator, our job is to listen to both sides and most importantly, make both sides to hear each other. Because we work in an environment where we work with all intelligent people, right? If they have one approach that they prefer, there must be a reason why they chose that approach specifically. So the trade-off analysis basically boils down, you take a problem and you try to quantify the problem. Can you measure how you solve that problem? Then you take these both opinions as an inputs, right? Okay, as an inputs, we convert them into inputs, that becomes your knobs. If you go with one, how will that move the needle of solving the problem? If you take another, how will that move the needle? And then you go deeper into what type of risks we're exposing ourselves to. If we go one way, another way, is that a cost concern? Is that a velocity concern? Is that a quality concern? And basically, you start comparing them on one scale. And hopefully, that data-driven approach will help to persuade both sides that one of those options is better than another. Now, I can see that where that situation can go in a gridlock, right? So you can have a stubborn, difficult stakeholder that can say, okay, it's my way or highway. In that case, I think going deeper and knowing your stakeholder on a personal level, which really helps to build that trust relationship where they will start opening up. Like, why are you insisting? Why are you really insisting on that option? What is the root cause of that belief that we need to go with your option and how that compares to another option? Right, so understanding that and then bringing both parties to the table to mediate that conflict, I think where we can excel much better than if we pick one side and we'll start just hammering the other side. I don't know, like these guys are correct in my opinion, personal, and we should go with their approach. That way, you're running a bridge with the other team, and then. Speaking of planning, next year you will probably work with them on another program and that can backfire as well. Right? What are your opinions on that?
Josh?
Yeah. That's all. It's a good stance going into it, realizing that they're both sides, or however many sides there are, these are smart people. They have their reasons. They need to understand each other. I agree. I want to add to that though. There's a reason TPM starts with a T, right? We are technically focused, or we should be. One of the things that we bring to the table with that technicality is being able to see beyond the needs of that project or that one solution and seeing what else is going on around it. And sometimes that will afford you a viewpoint that neither solution saw. And not to say that, well, here's this third solution that's better, but to give context, it may be that in one person's point of view, their solution is best, and in their view, it is. But once you give them the broader text, they may see the flaw and say, I get it. In fact, this won't work, and I understand that now. And it's being able to listen and lean for those instances where you realize that maybe they don't see that bigger picture, which is fine. That's not necessarily their job. That is our job, right? And I love your point on taking in on a personal point. I had an instance of that recently where, you know, an Amazonian that had been there 20 plus years, amazingly smart person, had very, very strong opinions, so strong that some people weren't really wanting to speak up. But I took a step back from, instead of, you know, pushing further down on the nail, you know, to match their energy, I pulled back and tried to connect with them and understand. And the root of it was risk avoidance. They didn't want to do something because they were afraid of unknown unknowns. And that's really what it boiled down to. Is like, well, we're highly distributed. If you do this, it could introduce these other problems. And so when I realized that, and you can look at it and say, oh well, but if we do it this way, it's what we call a two-way door decision, as in you can undo it. And it was as simple as we were adding a new field to a model, and we wanted to make that field required. He wanted it to be optional in case there was something that we couldn't find that may have broken it. So, well, but if you make it optional, knowing that later we really do want it to be required, it's harder to go from optional to required. But it's much, much easier to go from required back to optional. So start with the required. And if we hit some roadblock that we can't solve and we need to move forward, well, then we can make it optional and we can unblock ourselves. And once we were kind of on that same level of, again, like you said, Zhanat, where is the opposition coming from? Then you can approach it from that.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's like two-way doors, I guess, to use Amazon terms. But and to use another Amazon term here, because when I think of this, I actually think of, you know, you have the 2 options or the 3 options. You know, we'd even add sort of the Amazon sort of mechanism of having FAQs, maybe even root FAQs, right? I mean, kind of to fill in, you know, be a devil's advocate, like, you know, what are you trading off, right? To use the trade-off analysis, you know, what, when this approach, what are the good things? What are the bad things, you know, and then sort of mitigate, right? And the same thing for all the other options. And then kind of put that all on the board and then hopefully, you know, have a data-driven decision.
Yeah, definitely. So I just found this today. You've got to be careful in your two-way doors. So the idea, right, a two-way door is a door like open, you know, push and pull, can go both ways. And it allows you to enter a door but also exit if need be. A real-life analogy that you want to be careful that it's actually a two-way door decision, not that you're just saying that it is. There was this video of this poor woman stuck in a hotel, oh my goodness, shower. She was in the shower. She was stuck in it, right? Because the door was supposedly on a two-way hinge. So it opens in, but it could technically also open out. But if you open out, the bathroom was so small that the door would hit the toilet. You can't actually get out. So she pushed the door to get in, but when she went to close it, the hinge was installed incorrectly. So though it was supposed to be a two-way door decision, when she went to try to pull the door in order to leave, she couldn't. And when she pushed, it hit the toilet. They had to call maintenance, and they came in. This poor woman, they were able to give her a towel, but like she's sitting in the shower and they're having to uninstall the shower so she could get out. So
Wow.
you look at the instructions, and the instructions, I'm sure, on this door said two-way door hinge, but you read the fine print and you've got to install it this way and not that way, right?
Right.
So you just be truthful and watch yourself when you say something is a two-way door decision.
Right. Yeah, maybe it's not fully 2 ways, right? Maybe it'll cost you to go in the other way. I thought you were going to make a Boeing joke about the doors opening 2 ways, but you know, in case Boeing decides to sponsor us, I want to make that joke.
Yeah, no. Being in Seattle, I'm not going to touch that.
That's what I really like the framework that you shared with that. You angle about your colleague, where you start with more constraints because it's easier to loosen those constraints rather than start with the loose side and then try to get it stricter. I think that's a good insight.
Yeah, excellent. Well, let's take a pause.
Join us this October 4th from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the second annual TPM Summit in Mountain View, California at the Computer History Museum, or via livestream. This year, there will be 2 tracks delving into the functional aspects of being a TPM. There'll be plenty of time for networking, visiting our exhibitor hall, or even meeting with our career coaches one-on-one. We're excited to continue this learning journey with our incredible TPM community and hope to see you there.
Was here. We'll have a short break and we will be back in a couple of minutes. Okay, welcome back. And we're off to the second round now in TPM Jeopardy. Feel like a host. Okay, so I've got a whole new set of categories on the board. So the categories are resource allocation, stakeholder communication, change management, handling failures, and dealing with difficult stakeholders. That's a lot to remember, but it was you, Zhanat? Was it your turn or you, Josh? I couldn't remember who went last. We kind of went through a tangent.
Last time, so it's me.
Okay, it's you.
Let's just stakeholder management for 600.
Okay, dealing with difficult stakeholders or stakeholder
And
communication.
stakeholder communication.
Oh, you said communication. Sorry. I like them both. Since we went crisis last. Well, let's just go with communication this time, and yeah.
Okay, less contentious topic.
Maybe.
We'll see where it goes. Stakeholder communication. These strategies are used to communicate complex technical issues to non-technical stakeholders.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
These are used to communicate complex technical issues to non-technical stakeholders.
Wow. There's a term for that.
Keep it simple, stupid. I don't know.
You're right. No, it is communication bridging. I just made that up.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a term. I don't know. Yeah. All right. Let's dive in deep into that.
Yeah. So, at least the way I put it, first of all, yeah, there are obviously terms for everything, and you may not always know the term. Doesn't mean you don't know strategy. And maybe we can. Well, actually, pause it. What was the answer you were looking for the audience's sake?
Yeah. Well, I didn't put any answers, but in my mind, what I had was, so in the artifacts and in the emails and the communications, even in proposal documents, mechanism docs, whatever you call them at Amazon, you kind of put, a set of definitions and, acronym expansion, expanding on acronyms and things like that.
Yeah.
Then
even like the executive summary too can kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, even I hate to sort of the old Amazon sort of terminology, but even sort of weasel words, right? Sort of not having complex words. So the same thing applying to the technical side. I don't have a succinct term, I guess, overall for all this, but
cool.
yeah.
I wasn't sure if you were looking for a term, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so we're actually kind of on the same page when we're talking about bridging the gap, right? So we live in the middle of tech and business, right? We are the interface between the two. We speak the technical language, but as program managers, we have to also speak the business language. And so it's our job to translate between the two. And so, yeah, there's multiple ways you can do that. One, in your status reports, you make jargon words clear. Either it's using a glossary, which I'm always there for, but also in the way you communicate. For me, being at Amazon, right? It's effective though. The idea of the narrative style. So what you're looking at is who is your audience, what level of understanding are they going to have, and what is it that they care about, and you craft your status to that. So if I'm talking to VPs on the tech side, they're gonna be technical, which is great, but at the same time, they have the VP level. They don't care about what you did in your sprint today. They don't care about the question that came up in stand up. They may not even care about a specific milestone itself. They care about the project as a whole. Because it's very possible for a milestone to be behind, but the project to still be okay. If you're a good project manager and you have good buffers and things are staggered well, it doesn't matter that an individual milestone is a little behind or someone suddenly went on vacation and it really irked you. So it's keeping that in mind and making sure that you're talking about the right things to the right people. And then also being able to take these technical problems and talk about them in plain language. So like you said, we had this idea of weasel words. That's often making sure you're not making grandiose assumptions like saying any and all, this impacts everyone or all stakeholders. Like, no, how many? Like, what is the actual number you're looking at here? Because otherwise you're just throwing these numbers around. But it also goes towards that, are you being... You can tell the difference between a new project manager and a experienced one by how they approach you with a question. Sometimes you can tell that they're literally just repeating what their developer told them. It's like, look, I don't understand, but they just said these words. Can you help me understand these words? Like, they think they're asking a question or they're trying to, but you can tell they're just repeating the words. When what you need to get good at is understand what that developer's problem is and find a way to ask the right question from that. So if, if the developer, it's easy to go back to something like a framework, but if they're getting stuck on how a particular API is behaving, maybe the documentation is bad or something, but they're kind of stuck down in the weeds. You don't turn around and say like, documentation is bad. This Boolean doesn't seem to be behaving right. It might be a tuple or something. Like, no, you look at that and say, okay, there's a gap here, and we need to go find the people who own that API or the people who own that framework and see, do they have updated documentation? Can I reach out to the right stakeholder to see what's going on there? And you're less worried about that Boolean or that specific thing and looking at it more holistically and saying, okay, there's a communication gap here, there's a documentation gap, and let's see if we can go solve that instead. So it's looking at those particulars and finding what is it that you're actually trying to solve, so you can go and find the right stakeholders and ask the right questions. Bridging the gap. Bridging the gap.
Zhanat, do you have any other term that you would call this, or any of your anecdotes?
I resonate with all things you folks talked about, with the words, adapting your communication towards the lingo and the competency of your audience, right? We work a lot with engineering, but we also work with legal, compliance, marketing, audit, customer support, developer support, and all of them can have different terms. One anecdote to share, which is I found it to be pretty hilarious when I stumbled on this situation. Definitions. So I started up a data governance program. I have almost all the stakeholders that I just listed were there. But most importantly, I have my privacy organization and I have my data platform organization. When we talk, at one time, the data loss. Like, yes, data loss. What are we going to do about data loss? And then I noticed that people are talking about absolutely different dimensions. I had to pause it and say, wait. What do you folks in privacy mean when you say data loss? Isn't that obvious? The PII, personal identifiable information, leaked into public domain. That's data loss. I was like, coming from the data platform world, I see. But on the data platform and infrastructure, data loss means we literally lost data. We lost the physical bits on the storage devices. Your Kafka went out, customers did something, and we did not capture those events, right? We lost the physical bits of data. And I think that
Mm.
was an aha moment
Yeah.
for most parties. Like, oh, we were talking about absolutely different things, but refer to the same term. So that was interesting aha moment to me. Like, okay, seems like even within one company, we need to have a dictionary so that everybody is aligned on what specific terms mean.
Great.
Beautiful.
Uh,
You're
Thanks.
bridging the gap there still, right? But
Yes,
you're
precisely.
realizing that your stakeholders are talking about the same thing. That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Making false assumptions on what terminology means, basically, and kind of have to
Yeah.
make sure you're all on the same page there. So, right, I'm going to actually jump to the lightning round here because we're running a little bit short on time. So we're going to pick one question from the lightning round, and Zhanat, you're going to get the privilege, the honor of this. So I'll give you the
Hey,
list here, categories.
I think
Okay.
I think so. That by the end of this, I finally did the format of Jeopardy. Like, what do you mean when you say an answer and I can say the question to that answer?
Yeah. We could probably write into the network and maybe ask them to do a TPM version of it, and we can kind of get some candidates from
Oh,
here
there
to
you go.
jump on
Yeah.
there, right? So I don't know, maybe we'll invest in some buzzers and have a in-person one. That's another idea.
Oh, there you
But
go.
Ah, the
yeah,
summit. At the summit. Yeah,
At the
let's make
summit.
some buzzers.
yeah. Well, I'll be there. I'll have the mic. We can kind of do the whole live, with a live audience recording of that.
Notes.
So, all right, to the lightning round. So the categories are emerging trend, impact of AI and automation, remote work, and agile and DevOps integrations.
And yeah, all of these are good. I will go with AI and automation or 1000.
The impact of AI and automation. Putting all the chips in the pile in the stack in the middle. Okay.
Right.
Potato chips.
Potato chips.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I did not grow up watching Jeopardy, so I just saw Josh saying some numbers
Oh,
up
yeah,
in this.
yeah,
I'm just
totally.
repeating.
Okay, here goes. Impact of AI and automation. This is how AI and automation will change the responsibilities and skills required for TPMs. This is how AI and automation will change the responsibilities and skills required for TPMs.
That's how.
In the form of a
Man.
question.
Right. I was going to say, like, what is generative AI, but generative AI, I don't think it's gonna change the how, but maybe what is AGI?
AGI?
Like the general artificial intelligence?
Okay. So how? That's the question. How
Okay.
how is it going to put us out of a job?
Well, I'm so curious to learn what the right answer to that you jotted down.
There's no right answer.
Apparently you didn't. Horrible host, folks.
But
There's no
let me
right
tell you.
answer. We're the panel.
Right. We hosted a TPM Trail Failure event back in February at GitHub, right? And we had 3 TPM leaders. So we had Dylan, who's director and head of TPM at GitHub. We had Adil, who is now a PMO or Humane, if you know this AI pin devices, and like from the movie Her. And we had a head of TPM from Anyscale, right? Anyscale is a platform that allows you to host all types of machine learning models. And that was the question we posed to them. Like, you folks are TPMs, head of TPMs in these AI first companies. One is the doomsday scenario that you see that we all lose our job. And then overwhelmingly, their sentiment was that it is yet early to panic because we bring most of the value as TPMs is in reasoning about problems, reasoning in ways that these problems were not solved in the past. A lot of current AI, at least as the discussion went back then, a lot of of the current AI base their knowledge on pre-existing knowledge, right? It's all predictive text there and of the algorithm, the
Patterns.
LLM
Yeah.
patterns, things like what next word will be most probably the sequence, but they don't think about like future proofing the problems. They don't think about different scenarios and possibilities of what can go wrong or what stakeholder can have in mind while saying you one thing, but then actually reasoning from another perspective. So from all of this, it seemed like the role is less in danger. So the impact of it, at least in the current development of AI, right? It seems like a lot of our job will be automated, and that's good. Like a lot of tactical things, a lot of physical things. We were talking about Zoom summarizing notes. It is contentious questions like who's gonna take notes, and there are different people with different perspectives. I'm in the camp where I prefer to take notes because that who take notes controls the narrative. Notes is my mechanism to hold my stakeholders accountable. It's like, hey, this day you said this and this. Like, what changed? We agreed on certain things. That's in the notes. I know that I took notes that I know that, and I know to put the specific things in the notes when I take them. But that will be automated, right? So any different communication nudges, like or status updates, can be automated. Even writing a high-level status report based on multiple, say, tickets and updates and documents will be automated. But taking all of that and synthesizing a clear understanding of what it means for a technical program and how that impacts your final deliverable, I don't think the capabilities of AI is there yet. That's why I said maybe AGI will be that answer to the question when the AGI can actually reason, at least as the promise goes in the industry, it can reason at the human level and can think about scenarios that are not so obvious and do not pre-exist in their training models. But what do you folks think?
Let's for me, it comes down to you're right. There are things that are going to be automated, and hopefully we go the way that everyone else has been wanting to. Right? There's a lot of anger and resentment that we're spending so much time learning to draw a picture and write poetry instead of the functional things, so that the humans can go do the poetry and draw and do the art. Right? And I get that. There's a lot of anger. Thankfully for us, right, we're not at that side of our job. So the things that the AI are going to help with are those kind of mundane, iterative, easy to do things like taking notes, even planning a project, right? Because that's all input data, right? Based on the input, here's my optimal output. You can completely automate that. There are tools out there that do it today. But Zhanat, you're right in that it comes down to emotional intelligence. That's just something AI isn't going to get around to anytime soon. The ability to read the room, the ability to check in with that stakeholder at a more personal level and understand that there's some risk aversion going on here. And how do I counter that? How do I meet that person in the middle, or meet them where they're at and show them the right way? Like, AI is not going to be able to do those things. And to your point, it can reason about the future, but the only way it can do that is by prompting it to do so. Right? It's not going to do it on its own. So even in those cases, we're going to put on a new hat of the prompt bros, right? We're going to have to get good at just how we're good at asking Google a question. We're going to have to get good at asking generative AI a question. Because that's going to be our tool set is, hey, I need to analyze this risk. I need to think, how is it going to impact project A? But you need to learn how to describe project A well enough for it to be able to do the analysis, right? So that's a skill I think we're going to take on, which will have that bandwidth because AI will be able to do things like 80% of our status report and do that first pass of the project plan and you know all those sort of things, and we'll be able to free up to just like a developer going from C++ to Java. You would never make that jump, but in one you're worrying about garbage collection and where exactly in memory are things and horrid optimization of a linked list or something, right? So in Java, all of that is abstracted. The only reason you know what a linked list is because you learned it in some computer science class, because you're never going to write that yourself. But there's libraries for that. You move on. You don't do your own garbage collection, right? All it's doing is allowing us to operate at a higher level by taking the mundane away from us. So I'm not worried at all. We're just gonna our boundaries are just gonna shift some, but it's gonna shift into positive, I think.
Yeah, I
Do
think, I mean,
you,
the way I see this, it's sort of like Stack Overflow for TPMs. I mean, it's like a Copilot, basically, when you look at how engineers, now we have DevOps and we have all this continuous integration and continuous deployment, as ways to automate things, right? We'll have ways to automate and, to put us at a higher level in some of our other functions, right? We talk about summarizing meetings or maybe doing a quick check on what is CI/CD or what is some of those terminologies. Maybe as a TPM, you may have not have gone deep into like linked lists and things like that. So just like engineers use use Copilot, GitHub Copilot on their coding IDE and things like that, just to assist them. This is sort of able to assist us as well, not provide any sentient sort of guidance for us, but be our Copilot to sort of look at and check a few things, and being a prompt TPM or prompt engineering, technical engineering, or whatever I guess you'd call the term. So, sorry, Zhanat.
no, actually, you just told exactly what I was going to bring up, which that sentiment on that GitHub posted event was precisely that. DPNs need to take advantage of these tools. And if you will stay behind and you will over-index on the tactical things, then that particular position of that person will be phased out. Not the role. Just the role will shape even more strategic, even more leadership and executive, rather than tactical and execution. So I think I really wanted to underscore that really we need to take advantage of these, and hey, it will make our life easier. Then it's really fun to use, actually. Yeah.
And on that note, this concludes our TPM Jeopardy show. So it's great. We've got a bunch of questions in. I've got a bunch more. Maybe we'll do this in the future and go through the other topics, or maybe we'll get the audience to come up with some topics that they want us to answer. So,
visualize, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll work on some really cool visualization and a scorecard and buzzers and all that stuff. Get all the fancy stuff. Maybe, yeah. So before we go, and we'll spend some more time diving deeper into your books, in a sort of one-on-one show. But thank you for jumping on the show, and we will see you all at the summit coming up in October, which will be really fun. So make sure to get your tickets. Make sure to book your tickets, book your flights if you're not in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. So if you haven't got any tickets, what are you waiting for? But thank you guys. It's been really fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it and learned about Jeopardy, right? For those of you who haven't watched the show.
Yes. One final question on that.
Yeah.
Did I win?
Probably.
We're all winners. We're all winners, right?
Just joking.
The whole community. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all for listening as well, and see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.